Hello guys, welcome to my channel. I would like to start with the introduction. My name is Zafar and I'm a software engineer. It's been 3 years I've been writing code and doing the software engineering, even though it's not that much. So I decided to start this YouTube channel in order to share my knowledge that I've gained right with you, with people who is just starting to learn the software engineering, the architectures, the code, the designs, and so on. I believe that whatever you learn, even though it's like 1 month, right, you're just doing something for 1 month, I believe that it's very important to share that knowledge. Otherwise, you will forget it and you will not benefit others. So even though I have like 3 years of experience, I think I have something to share with you. And today I would like to talk about the software architecture, which is one of the most important things in the software industry, right? Whenever you wanna build something, whether it's an app, right? It's mobile app or web app or just the backend system, you need the architecture. You need to know how that's going to look like and what components are going to talk to, what kind of components are going to talk to each other and so on. For example, even when you want to build a house, right? Let's don't talk about the software engineering. Even if you want to build a house, you need the architecture, right? You need to specify that you want to have 2 doors, 5 windows, right? How that's going to look like, the design itself, the colors and everything. Uh, Usually, like the architecture is very, very important. Without it, maybe you're going to write a mess code, right? And nothing is going to be clear. What's talking, like what is talking to what, right? How your app is functioning, and so on. Basically, this is regarding the architecture. Before the architecture itself, you need to have a purpose, right? You need to know what you are going to build. If it's a web app, for example, let's say a student managed portal management, right? All right, this is the purpose. This is very important. Before you build something, you need to specify, you need to know your purpose, the purpose of the application. So based on the purpose, you move on to the modeling. Basically, you specify the models, right? And then you start building the architecture, after which you basically continue writing the code. Today we are going to talk about the architecture itself. Like actually we have two levels of architectures, the high level and the low level. Let me show you the first, which is the high level. High level architecture, it's basically specify how your system like is going to look like from the high level perspective, right? For example, I have a I have a web app, right, which is talking to the backend, and the backend is talking to the database. Let me give you an example. For example, um, let's say I have a web app, right? This is going to be a web app. We can call it a student portal, right? And this web app is going to talk to an API. Just this is the backend API. Let's call it student API, right? Student API, which is which is going to talk to a database. Very straightforward, simple. This is high level architecture, high level view of our student portal, management portal, right? This is basically, let's call it student database. Increase this. All right, this is the high level architecture where you basically say, all right, I have a client, right? I have a client, and this client basically it can be a web app, it can be a mobile, right? But in our case, it's a web app, it's the student portal, and this client is talking to a backend, to an API, right? To our backend microservice, which is student API, we called it. And this Backend is basically talking to an external resource. It can be a database, it can be an Azure, it can be caching or something like this. Basically, student database, right? This is the high level. We know that we have a client, right? We know we have that backend, and that backend is talking to the database, right? It's not very clear regarding the details. What I want to say is, like, we don't know what kind of services we are going to have, right? Or what kind of models we are going to have. This is the high level. Basically, before starting the low level architecture where you show the flows, you show your services, your methods, your models, you kind of need to visualize this from the high level perspective. You need to see, all right, this is my web app, right? This is my client, right? And like this is my backend and this is my database, right? This is very straightforward. One of the simplest examples, right? Definitely, the high level can be much more complex. For example, this student API may talk to other APIs as well. So this can be called, let me call it a microservice, right? So it's clearer. Student orchestrator microservice, right? Which is going to talk to different microservices. For example, let's say we have here uh, student management, student management microservice, right? And then let's say we have a student group microservice, right? And then we have just a group microservice as an example. So as you can see, this student orchestrator microservice is communicating with three different microservices. Why? Probably it's doing a complex logic, right? Probably it's trying to go and do some management with the student and then kind of go add the student group and then add the group itself, something like this. When the system is really going to, like, when the system is going to require a complex logic, there we probably may need to have multiple microservices, as in this example, right? And each microservice has its own dependency, right? Here can be a database, right? For example, let's say students database, right? And here we may have, let's say, student groups database as an example for you. And here, for example, we have just the groups database. This is the high level, as you can see, uh, architecture. It doesn't require you to go deeper and show the services and controllers and the models methods, right? This is for the low level. All right, I think the high level it's already clear for you, right? You're basically looking at your system from the high level perspective, and you can see how the microservices are communicating, right? How many clients you have and the databases and your external sources and so on. If we go deeper, like if you want to go deeper, right, it's basically going to be called a low-level architecture, which you basically pass to the engineers so they can go look at the architecture and start developing the system itself. Mostly, I would say that the high level is also important for the engineers, right, to look at and to understand how the system works. But mostly, based on my experience, we use the high level architecture definitely first to understand the system, but also to show the clients, right? So the clients uh, also understand the flow and maybe they can see some issues or something is missing and later on we can change and get the feedback from them, right? All right, what about the low level architecture? Mostly the clients, I would say they just look and they maybe don't understand it because it's in too much details. So most of the times we build a low-level architecture for the engineers, so engineers can have a look and understand the flows, what services to build, which model to create, right? What methods create, and so on. All right. Low-level architecture. Let's move on. It's something simple, where you basically need to define first. Let me explain. It's a service, right? Service, and this service is going to wait, before the service it's a model, right? We want to understand, like we want to know what kind of models we are going to use in our system. So it's if it's a student portal, probably we are going to have a model called student, right? Or a group. It can be student and it can be a group, right? All right, we have this student model, right? All right, after that we need to specify the services. We need to build the services. It can be a student service, it can be a group service, and after the service, it comes a method, right? A method. All right. Student, basically the model. Let's call it a model, the student model. Then the service, then the method. Okay. And we can also, um, like from the method, we have three important things, right? In the method itself. The first is input. Okay, what like if there is a method which takes an input, right? What it is, we need to specify it. After the input, it is the method name, right? And the third one is output. If you ask me why do we need these things, right? Why do we need to specify the input of the method, the name, and the output? I think the answer is clear. So the software engineers who are going to go take the architecture and start implementing it, they understand it 100%. They know what the input is. They know the name of the method, right? So it's like everything in details, and they know the output. So they don't basically need to come back to you and ask, okay, I'm seeing add student, the method add student, right? What's the input? Maybe it's something different. What's the output? So like having in our low-level architecture the method input name and output specified is very important because this is going to make the progress of the implementation much more faster. All right, so it's basically model, service, method, and then method input, method name, and method output. Let's kind of let's try to implement this low-level architecture. Let's start from the model, right? I'm going to mark it as an orange color because it's in progress, right? Let me use this one. All right. Okay, let's go. The orange color means that we just started working on this box. We're going to create the model, right? When I finish creating the model, I'm going to mark it as a green because I just completed it. So this is also we are going to talk maybe in other videos, right? How to show the progress in your architecture by using these colors, right? Creating a PR and so on. Okay, let's start with the model. Let's say I have a model called a student, right? Student. Let me go a bit down. Okay. And this student may have an ID, which is the good, right? Foreign key. And then let's say string name. And for example, type, right? Let's say student type. Very simple model, right? With three properties. Okay, let's say we have this model, which means that we just completed this box, right? We just created the model. Now we know that we are going to use in our architecture, in our system, this student model. Okay, and now the second is the service. So basically, we need to start implementing the services. Usually, for the portal, we need the get all, right? We need the add student. We need the get all students, so we can see the all students and maybe modify. But let's start from something mm, very simple. Let's start from the add student. So let's start developing a service which is going to add our student to the database. Let me mark it as an orange, right? Okay, basically the service, it's going to cover the controller, the service, and the broker, basically uh, the database as well. So basically, let's start. We are going to have a controller, right? Controller, it's basically so the client uh, can call our backend, right? We need to expose the logic from the controller. Let's call this as a controller first. Before that, let me choose this one. Okay, it's going to be called students controller, right? All right. And then students controller is definitely going to talk a service, right? Probably it's going to be called student service. Very simple. And the student service is gonna be talking to um, storage broker, right? Because the storage broker is uh like is this it's not a service, it's a broker which is going to talk to a database. The service cannot directly interact with an external source, right? So we need a broker. And this broker is basically going to talk to a student's database, right? Student's database. As you can see, it's very straightforward. We have the students controller, we have student service, we have storage broker, which is talking to the students database, right? So this is more in details. If in the high level, as you remember, we were having something like, let's say, student management microservice talking to the database, right? It's not clear what kind of controller it has, right? What services, what brokers, right? While in the low level architecture, we are just basically specifying them, and it becomes clear for us, like to understand what to build. Because when I'm going to go and write code, I need to know, right, what service to build, which broker, the model, and the controller. Because the client is going to expect from me to provide for him a controller, so he can call it. All right, service is done. So we basically specified that we have these classes, right? These services. Basically, controller, service, the storage broker, and the database. All right, and now method, right? We need to specify more. It's not gonna be enough for a software engineer to know that there is a student service, right? Because he also needs to understand, okay, I have a student service. What am I going to implement in it, right? Because we cannot create a PR or, right? We cannot complete a task just by creating a service. We need to do something more. We need to create a method which is testable, right? Which is tested and validated. All right, we go with the methods. Let's start from the methods. Let me mark it as an orange. All right, let's start from the left. We have the student controller, which is going to have a method. Um, Let me name this as a method. Okay, well, we have the method, right? Now let's specify the input, right? The method is complete. I'm gonna make it as a green. The input is going to be um so since we agreed that we are going to build a method called add student, we are going to build the logic for adding the student. We are going to input the student because the client will send us the student information from the portal. So it's going to be a student model, right? It's the same model I just created here. Okay, we did the input. As you can see, it's clear. We have this method, right? And it has the input, which is student. Let me mark this as a green as well. And the second one is a name, right? We need to give a name for the method, right? Name. And name basically is going to be post student async, right? Post student async. Because the language of a controller, let's say if we have a service for the student which has a method add student async, right? We cannot use the same name for the controller because controller is a different level. It's not a service. So for the controller, we use the controller's language, right? So we say post student async. We say post student async here. So this is our name for the method. And the last one is output, right? We mark this as a green. Okay, the output. Let's specify the output. Output is going to be, it's going to be a value task, for example, right? Let's say action result, because in .NET, the controllers usually like we return with the action result, right? And then we are going to return the added student. So the output is simple. It can vary on languages. Um, so this architecture is not specifically for the .NET, for the C#. I'm just giving you an example, right? All right. So now we have the input, we have the name, and we have the output. All right. We mark it as a green, and then we basically continue with the service and the broker. As you can see, when we have the student controller with the method specified, including the input, right, including the name, the output, it's going to be much more easier for an engineer to come and start building this controller because he's going to understand, okay, my input is going to be student, the method name is going to be post, and the output is going to be basically a value task action result student. Very simple, very straightforward, no need to go and ask more questions. All right, I hope this was clear. Let's move on to the student service. It's very similar, right? Same method, the same input, but the name is going to change a little bit. So here at the service level, we call it add student, and the output is going to be just value task student because the action result is for the controller, right? All right, let me kind of adjust the boxes a little bit. Okay, so for the student, we just created the method and the broker left. Let's move on to the broker. The broker is like, again, very simple. Just the method is going to change because the language of the broker, like when it comes to the naming methods, right? For the broker service and controllers, we have languages. So we don't say add at the controller level, right? And at the broker level because the add word like is used only for the service. For the broker, it is insert. I'm ta I'm the I'm explaining this from what I've learned, right? What I've learned from the standard from Hassan Habib. This is how he basically made it simple for the engineers to understand and to kind of make the code clearer. And the name is going to be insert student async. Well, now we have like complete low-level architecture. As you can see, we have the controller with the method, we have the service with the method, and the broker with the method, and the database specified. With this information, if you give me a task, right, it's going to be very easy for me to go and implement it because I know, okay, this is the student model. I'm gonna go create this model. I'm gonna go do migration, right, which is going to create a database for me here, after which I'm gonna go and build a broker, which is talking to the database. Probably if it's a C#.NET, like connect my broker, make it talk to the entity framework. After my broker is completed, I'm gonna go and build this service, right? Make sure that it's tested. And after the service is complete, I'm just gonna go and build a controller. Everything is clear. I don't have to ask any questions. The low-level architecture basically is complete, right? It makes things easier for the engineers. And later on, let's say when the project is gonna expand, it's going to be easier for you to go to navigate, see how the flows, how the services are talking to each other, and see maybe something is missing, right? And just do some orchestration work and so on. Basically, this is the low-level architecture. Let me change the colors so it's clear. We have the controller, right? And then the service, and the last one is the broker, which is talking to the database. The low-level architecture, as you can see, it's more detailed and it's very clear. And basically, this is from what you should start when you want to build a system, whether it's a web app, it's a mobile app. Um, Definitely, as I explained before, the high-level architecture is very important first, so you can visualize and see what components, right, you're going to have and which component is talking to which, right? What kind of external sources like you have. For example, it can be the database or something else. For example, it can be an open EI if you want to integrate with an EI, right? After which you can move on to the low-level architecture by creating the model, right? Like specifying the model, then specifying the services, right? Then methods and input, method name, and method output. And after that, basically, low-level architecture is going to look something like this. After which you basically can go and build your code and make sure that everything is working. And if you miss something, just go come back to the architecture and see maybe the naming is wrong, right, in your code. Or, for example, it also helps for the reviews. Let's say when you have this architecture submitted and agreed and let's say approved, right? Definitely other engineers are going to review your code. And basically when they compare your architecture with your code and if something is not matching, right? Let's say you said uh, in your architecture it says add student async, but in the implementation it's add group async or post student async. Definitely. This is going to be noticeable. The engineers are going to leave comments to you so you can fix and make sure the system is clear and solid. Well, thank you very much. I think for today, this was our topic. I hope it was clear and I hope that you learned something new. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. Bye bye.